So if we understand this idea, but perhaps you're not completely persuaded yet, that's okay. Try to travel with me along this path. And then as we test this path, in the wholeness of all these ideas and how they connect together, and especially in your experience in trying to help people, and your own experience of going through your own fifth gate, and all the reflections you can give to this. Because that's where your development as a powerful and effective trainer lies. In this very critical part. Anybody can recite a bunch of rules. Give people a bunch of mantras or prayers. Give people ideas. But you know what? It changes nothing. If that could change anything, we would do wellness by television. The fact is that we have to do it by the specifics of winning our patients' confidence by getting deeply into the details of their lives. We have to find where the true connections of ideas are in their history. And we have to account for the fact that we remember what we're being told. And that's one thing I must caution you about. I can probably teach you some very interesting techniques for how to remember certain things. And that again is a completely another lecture, another lesson that we can share. It is totally teachable. But the most important thing for you to know now is the confidence of your patient from the first contact straight through to this very critical process is critically important, because life has taught our patient a perspective about themselves and the world. If we're not good salesmen, how are we going to teach them a different one? Yes, there's power that is in the seeds of the 5 gates wisdom itself. But you can be as wise as you like. If no one's listening, you are the sound of a tree that falls in a forest when no one's around. Or perhaps, to make it more clear, you'll only be talking to yourself, no matter how smart your ideas. So you must tie your patient into not only a perspective, but in a humble way, into yourself. Remember, this is inclusionary. This is not arm's length. This, in a sense, is an embrace. It must be strong, thorough, not only believable, but true. If your heart does not ring true with it, never underestimate the ability of someone else to see that and get their own ADD, switch you off, but give you a polite, of course, response. When we get to the point that a person will discuss, with your help, the beginnings of their lives, a good rule of thumb to remember is that the more memories they have blocked, the more trouble lies back there. More trouble where there is less memory. You may think that the most important thing to know is that somebody had asthma or somebody was raped. It really isn't. What's important to know is how they process the information. Because how they process the information is the thing that leaves the lasting part of themselves distorted. Or perhaps not. Haven't you wondered sometimes you'll meet a person, she says, well, I was sexually, she might say abused because somebody taught her that, but, or he, and really what they were was used, and not necessarily unconsensually. And we will get into the whole issue of punishment, seduction, and sexuality in early childhood as a completely separate subject in another very important lecture. Because we can be so easily distracted by our own prejudice, our own conclusions of how we think we would have felt under their circumstances. I don't care what the circumstances were. But what we must know is how they were affected by them. Because that's reality for them. And remember, we're trying to find the roadmap of how they grew up to be who they are, and especially where the trouble they believed, they experienced, and affected them in profound ways, where these things lie. And we must find the lies of where these things lie. Because if we can't find the lies, we can't change their mind about anything. All we can do is get them to recite a long, painful, or happy tale, or perhaps more likely, one that is superficial and irrelevant. And if we only get them to tell the tale of the facts, the feelings, and the events, and whatever, the thoughts, what we're going to have, if we don't get to the center of why they were important, is an interesting history lesson. That is not the point to the fifth gate. The point to the fifth gate is to find out where those critical turning points were that still live in them today, probably not so much consciously, because if they were conscious of it, they'd already be healing from it. Because I love this saying, the truth does set us free. And why that's important and how that works, again, is another lecture. But for now, the important thing is that we find the mind space, the emotional space in which our patient as a child lived. And the most amazing thing is, if you can help your patient feel safe, those little switches that turned off the memories, start turning them back on. If your patient feels safe, respects you, and knows that this is important, and that it may very well provide a healing force that they can't find anywhere, that maybe they've looked for most of their lives. If they have those positive feelings about the experience, you can help them. Because the 5 gates is a science. But the experience of the therapist-patient alliance is perhaps a science in your mind once you really get proficient. But it is an emotional bond that has great power if used positively in the minds and hearts of your patients. So keep in mind, you are a salesman. I remember giving a lecture to 23 therapists in the Florida drug prison environment, and 5 of them actually went to the management there and complained. Of course, fortunately, the management there was pretty smart. And they said,